And it came about by doing work in Cambridge in England, in what they call the Technopole, where many university developed ideas and experimental processes have been taken forward into business. And again in social science, in social areas, as well as in the biophysics, as well as technical areas. And when I went and interviewed these people, I found that they all had a comment, which is not surprising, but to hear it in an interview over and over again was important. And that was that they relied on that which they weren't able to explain, not the analysis that everybody's taught. They relied on gut feel, sense from somewhere else, intuition. Now, we then went back and measured that and found that yes, they do have that capacity to identify something which is then fed to the brain. They actually get it though before the brain starts processing it. Right. Now the idea is, how do you move from the idea, which is a nuance up in the brain, how do you move to the point where you can start to understand how to actually exploit that little shot earlier? And that's where I believe this concept of intuition becomes the fundamental building block. Now, it's not limited to entrepreneurs. It's in artists, in musicians, it's in medicine, it's everywhere. I think the important issue, though, is that where is this intuition coming from? Now, what we've identified, and this was originally done by some colleagues at the Heart Math Institute in California, on meditators who had a very strong signal that they were picking up information other than what they had in terms of pattern recognitions, the normal processes of cognitive thinking. This was outside of cognitive thinking. So the question is, where is it coming from? And what we did at the with the Heart Math one was to demonstrate again on entrepreneurs, as they had on meditators, that the autonomic nervous system was really the powerhouse of another form of information which we were going to be able to gather if we were alert to it, if we were in the zone, as you call it. Right. The important aspect is that we know from physics, fundamentally from physics, that the whole universe is interconnected. Now, it's absurd to suggest, as psychologists do because they cut us off at the neck and say it's all up here. That's absurd in my thinking. We as human beings are interconnected to that same universe. That means that we're able to absorb and, I believe, recognize energy that is coming in, and we're all, every part of us has energy in penetrating us and then being reflected back out again with different pieces of information on it. Now, the concept, therefore, that we have is that the body is receiving energy and remembering everything that we're going to face in the future is already here. We see stars which have existed well before our point in time. Takes a long time for it to get here. So my point is that much of the future, I don't mean that we just see a picture of the future, but much of the future in terms of its wavelengths and its structure is already there. The question is, how do we interpret that? Now, my argument is it's the autonomic nervous system through the sympathetic and parasympathetic pulses that the heart puts out. And the heart has intelligence. It has similar intelligence, not to the same capacity, as the brain. It processes this, feeds it to the brain, and then the brain determines what we as individuals actually wish to do. So we're not in any way eliminating the free will of the individual. We're just providing more information. So coming back to your zoning and what it's all about, I believe it is this issue of coherence. If we can get our bodies into coherence, and I'll explain that, then indeed we're able to receive and understand the energy communication. Communication is the word I'm talking about. Now, coming back to the coherence, let me use a very simple illustration. If we were to take a pool, and I feel like Michelangelo because he actually observed this many centuries ago, but if we take a pool and we drop some pebbles into that still pool, you all know that what happens is waves actually move out from the point of impact. The important thing is that if indeed those waves coming from the different pebbles, which are dropped at exactly the same height, of the same weight and the same force, when they hit the water, they will produce waves that have the same wavelength, and hence when they come together they will reinforce and you'll have a slightly higher amplitude. If indeed you drop pebbles in at different weights and different heights, then when those waves come together they will destruct because they are out of frequency. Now, what I'm on about therefore is that we are in the same situation. If our bodies or our beings have the capacity to think about that energy that's coming into us, and we have the capacity to put ourselves at the same frequency as that, then we'll get reinforcement, we'll get knowledge, we'll get communication. And that, to my mind, is a fundamental part of what this intuition is all about. Where it comes from me, and I've had to work out by myself how one's going to do it, I have a colleague, Tiller, used to be at Stanford University, he's now retired, and he's developed some of this understanding of what happens in the vacuum. Mm-hmm. That is the space between the atoms, of whether it's the atoms there or the atoms in my body, there is space, and that's called in physics the vacuum. Now, that's where a lot of these very, very different waves are. And my argument is if you can get in touch with those, then you're going to get the communication that we're after. Now that's a good question. I had to put a price on this one, I think. Well, I'm not sure whether I do it the right way. I can only explain how I would do it. So you do it through breathing. Mm-hmm. So you breathe in you breathe on the upbeat, and then you breathe out through the muscles of the tummy, or you feel you do anyway, on the low beat. If indeed you've got some words or image that you can repeat, it seems to enhance that capacity to feel the body calm down. Now, of course, the Buddhists and that know how to do this better than I can, but that gets the body calmed down. Then the question is how do you get your mind away from the world and the normal problems of the day? Now, my technique is to actually start to allow my mind to concentrate as I'm breathing in and out on the vacuum, trying to get a feeling that I'm in the vacuum.
Is that like the space between thought?
Yeah.
Right.
So that instead of doing it up here in a rational, cognitive fashion, I'm allowing myself to be in the vacuum so that I'm actually inside all of that area where this communication is going on. Now, having done that, and it might take time, it doesn't just happen in the flick of an eye, it might take me, 10 minutes, it might take me half an hour, it never happens the same twice. But when you are in that state, and this is the bit where I get the confirmation that something's working, then you are able to sense communication with, in my case, somebody else, another being at a distance, not just somebody close by. And that's when you can get the thoughts and feelings of what binds you together, whether it's love or whether it's a sense of purpose. But I want to take it a bit further, because in a sense, this is getting ready for proper prayer in my book. Prayer in the Christian sense, not necessarily the Buddhist sense. And that prayer, if you're in that state, I believe that's when you are able to sense and understand the communication from God. Because God is the universe, and certainly the energy that is flowing. And that's where the information available about him can be actually absorbed and transformed. I thought if we could understand this intuition and understand it in the way in which you can actually not so much control it, but understand it in order to utilize that that understanding. So my concept was, if we could understand intuition, and we had the ability, therefore, to have more confidence in it, then it would help us in making better decisions, because those decisions would be reflecting the what I will call the future outcomes, but in the present. Now, we haven't got there yet, Susan. I can't just say we can do that, but we're at least moving in the direction where we're measuring something, and being a physicist, measuring something is always important, because then you can start to understand and how to adjust it, and etc., etc.
So it seems that there's been that we've lost a trust in that because we can't quantify it.
Absolutely lost the trust in ourselves. You're absolutely right. I always like to raise the issue that when you go back into the Middle Ages, when you look at everything that was spiritual or sacred, it always had a halo around it. Now, the question I used to ask myself, why did they always put that light around it? And it was only after I started to understand how to make that connection that I said, what they're seeing is that energy that's around the being, around us all. And that's that energy we can actually start to interact with. You see, one of the things that you can actually demonstrate physically today is an aura around our beings if you use a particular photographic method where you put whatever it is between a couple of fixed energy positives and negatives in a film. And the thing that really set me off was to see this done. If you take a leaf, a large leaf, and put it between these energy plates, and then take a photo of it, you can see it. There it is, it's all there, the shape's there, and you can even see the veins. Now, the interesting thing is that if you then take that leaf away, or even to get another leaf, but if you take that leaf away, cut away half of it, and move that away well and truly, re-photograph that cut leaf, you now find that the outline and the veins are reproduced. In other words, that information has still remained.
It's like it has a memory.
It's got memory. And that is why I got excited about this. Now, when I am teaching, what I'm trying to get the students to understand, and they are, is that we have to treat everybody as a holistic being. Not just as somebody you can exploit, not just utilising their brains, but how do you bring their whole being into the activity? And it's the same with a business, because an organisation is indeed a metaphor for a human being. That's the way we analyse them. It's the way even a business has to have a name, and it has to have all the other aspects. But with an organisation, you've got to treat the whole organisation as an interactive whole, not just as bits. And that, to my mind, is where we start to get the power of recognising that the zone, as you like to call it, applies to us in our everyday life. they certainly have an understanding of the spiritual. And their very real connection to the earth, which is part of the whole of our universe, to which we're interconnected, which physics tells us, demonstrates that it has to be right. Yes, I think it's very interesting that we are coming back to a much greater seeking of the spiritual. Now, the spiritual is what I talked to you about before. So that's the change. It's going to happen tomorrow. It's not going to happen in the flick of an eye. But that's where we're going to. I agree with you.